Its culture is homogeneous. Its geography has been promised by divine will and power, and its race is as pure as the angels themselves. Needless to say, Ernest Renan debunks all these founding myths of the nation in his famous essay, What is a Nation? The gist of Renan's argument is that the nation is based on a state of consciousness that is subject to a daily plebiscite. In other words, the idea of the nation is a historical construct. He takes the example of France to show how the latter had gone through different phases of national consciousness and national languages. As far as the racial issue is concerned, Renan unequivocally argues that what is considered French race is made of layers and layers of ethnic admixture of blood. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Manaa, thank you for this very interesting paper. I'd like to thank all our panelists for their wonderful and very rich and interesting papers. Now I think we move on to your questions. I'd like to ask the audience if you have any questions for our panelists.
So I'd like to thank all three presenters for their perceptive and penetrating presentations. And I have always that natural inclination to literary studies, so I thank Dr. Mira for her good reading of the novels, and I also would like to thank Dr. Manaa for complimenting Professor Rashid's reading and analysis of whom she proffered that historical context of his reading.
She gave better details, I think.
But we grasped maybe in a more focused way, okay, what you provide in terms of analysis. Now, when I first read the title of Professor Rifa, I thought about biological hybridity, and I imagined those bodies in terms of joining the human and superhuman, or the normal and paranormal characteristics that are provided in Yeats' poetry. But when I listened to your analysis, I assimilated together the way you contextualize it, and you related it to historical and the political hybridity. When it comes to the aesthetic hybridity, can we consider the text just like those hybridized bodies in his poetry as a space that exceeds or maybe surpasses the genre law? Because with Yeats, we do not only find poetry. I think that the epic is included in terms of valorizing the national parks, etc. So there's the absolute, nationalism is, as you state, is heavily present in the text. It is also the fantasy, so there's the fantastic and supernatural. We also have mythology. So can it be does it make part in that maybe dynamic generic identity of the text, where even in terms of genre, we can consider the text hybridized? Right. That's it.
Okay, like the answer now.
I'd like to ask a question. Thank you for your insightful presentations. My question for Professor Khalifa. Your reading of Yeats, you are presenting Yeats as a postmodernist, an avant-gardist before, because you presented him as a post-Cartesian critic and critic. The mind-body dichotomy, he deconstructs this dichotomy. The body in the logocentrism, Western logocentrism, is regarded as a taboo, as the other, as the mechanical, the bulk, the somatic part, whereas the mind is the seat of identity and consciousness. So with Yeats, probably with the Romantics before him, Blake and yes. So the body regains, also the transcendentalist in America, Whitman, I'm teaching this year, regains its place or part in consciousness or identity. So how far is it your personal reading that makes Yeats a postmodernist, probably post-colonial also? Or is he really has this potential to criticize modernity or modernism before the end of modernism, the post-war, Second World War? This is my question. My second question for Dr. Manaa is hybridity in relation to the nationalism and the claims of originality and the purity of identity. How far can you read Yeats' quote as the question of hybridity in reference to the essentialist view of identity? Don't you see there's a paradox between them? Hybridity refuses fixity. Yes, purity of identity claims identity. Or is it possible to recuperate a former original moment of identity before colonization? Or is it a move forward into a new temporality as Homi Bhabha presented it? It's a new moment, it's a newness. He has a title of one of his chapters, The Newness of Identity, something new, not part of the dyadic divide, self and other, present, past, but something new. How far Yeats' works promote or suggest such a reading? The pagan deity and the Christian symbolism in Yeats, and the return to Bethlehem, it's a return for rebirth, for something new. And the gyre, the tornado that turns, that may create, it is a fall apart, but after falling apart, we may rise again. The possibilities, the potential of this. Thank you.
Okay, have I another question? So, shall we? Yes.
My question is for Dr. Sindanwira. So I want to thank you so much for this insightful presentation. But can we say that Emil has an identity crisis? Because as you mentioned, Emil or Amy couldn't cope with the life in America, even though after changing her name and coping with the style, with the American style, we can say. So can we say that she has a crisis, identity crisis? And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I think that's all very enough perhaps. Shall we start with the I'd like to start answers. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the questions, by the way. Thank you both of you for asking this question. And I see some Yeatian scholars in the room as well. So not only Dr. Manaa, myself, I see some people who are really interested in Yeats. As I said, he's certainly one of the most interesting poets of the 20th century. Right. I'll try just to answer both of you at the same time, simultaneously. Right, so the question of hybridity in genre, I think that's what you want perhaps to know. Certainly, W. Yeats is one of those who hybridizes his text, as you said, and he uses, and text in general is a hybrid poem, if you think about it. And more specifically, W. Yeats, he tends to hybridize in the sense that you have poems in which he uses dramatic pieces in it. If you're taking his epic poetry, which is not very interesting, by the way, because he started with that very famous Wandering of Oisin, in which he narrates the story of this mythic figure, Irish mythic figure, and he tries to model it after Ulysses. It's not a great epic poem, but it does really mix up, hybridize, since the entire theme is about hybridization. He hybridizes his text. There are lots of cases in his poems where he uses dramatic, narrative, in poetic, and vice versa. The dichotomy, can you consider him postmodern? Of course. I think there's a book on Yeats and postmodernism, and there's another book also on Yeats and postcolonialism, and the two of them, as Professor Bahlila said this morning, they do overlap, the two. Yeats, of course, he, to a certain extent, the radicalization of his text, I think it happened thanks to a very important encounter in his life with Ezra Pound. I think the influence of Ezra Pound and Yeats was quite substantial. He was the one who introduced him to a new form of writing. But also, I guess, his reading of Nietzsche, and I think this is another link that sends him forward in terms of the static history to postmodernity that you mentioned. The dichotomy between mind and body, of course, W. Yeats as a romantic, as a belated romantic also, that we refer to him as such. Harold Bloom, he uses this term. Certainly there's the idea of how to go beyond the dismemberment of the body. I think I showed you a picture by Antoine in which there's some kind of a summary of this modern epistemology which is based on the splitting of the mind, which is deep down, if you think about it, it's a theological idea. Right from the beginning, from Eden, the idea, of course, that the body has to be mortified. The original fall is based on this mortification of the body. Through what? Through labor. The body has to suffer in order to regain paradise. So the idea is deeply ingrained, deeply steeped in Western philosophy, in Western theology, and you see the repercussions of that, of course, in the literature of the West. I'm not sure about our literature, perhaps we have some, but I think the notion of the original sin is so important, it's fundamental in Western philosophy. I don't know if I've answered your questions, but we might rebound on other things if you're... Okay, thank you. I think Cinda will... Yeah? Maroua, you
You asked me about this hybridity and its relation to nationalism, so you know that what Yeats' project was to give a voice to Ireland, especially after the Great Hunger and etc. So, all is based on myth and mythologizing of this nation. Whether of the Irish identity or the community or the land or whatever. So, and we know that Ireland suffered a lot from colonization, from colonialism, etc. And I don't think that we can talk about a pure race in Ireland, especially after colonization. So it's a mixed race, mixed blood, and as Romy Robert says, it is the outcome of colonial encounters. This is the case of Ireland. Thank you.
Okay, so concerning the question about is Amal have an identity crisis? So, well, in the beginning, yes. So here I am answering your question. Sorry. It's okay, so I'm still in the beginning. Okay, well, concerning your question, well, in the beginning, Amal, yeah, she has, an identity crisis, because if we talk about the dialectics, okay, so we started with the thesis, okay, which marks her previous culture, her previous identity, and then we have the antithesis, which is the American way of life, the American culture. So there was a sort of clash, there was a sort of crisis. Okay, so she tried to throw herself on the new way of life, but she said that she feels like she betrayed herself. So that's why she tries to come up with a synthesis. Okay, to be selective, taking some of the previous, preserving some of the previous identity and acquiring new ones from the new way of life. So here we can talk about the thin and thick culture. So thin culture is represented by the, let's say, lifestyle, simple way of life. Okay. So for the name, for example, from Anna to Amy, but the thick culture, which represents the morals and values are kept inside and ingrained. So she embraces her duality, her two-ness, and she tries to display both identities going in parallel without no crisis. So in the beginning there was a crisis, but then she embraces her two-ness. Does this answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a part of the question I didn't answer. Just remember, we talked about the work and the dichotomy between the work, the text, and what it means, or something like this. I think you mentioned that, didn't you? Yeah. So I think in my talk I talked about a notion, and actually I didn't mention who said the thinginess of the work of art. It's a Heideggerian term, and Heidegger basically was the first to give a certain sense of the work, not only as an essential, because that's most often what we tend to associate with the work, is the essence of it, is the meaning, is the mind, what it is, what a poem wants to say most often, the meaning, the essential part of it. But Heidegger, I think this is the importance of Heidegger, and also the repercussion of this later on on Derrida, when he gives rather more prominence to the thinginess of the work. That is the matter, the body of the work, and not only the essence. A work takes its essence from its body and not vice versa most often. W. Yeats talked about this, and I think we did mention this, Oh Body Straight, and more than this. The poem also that I quoted the last stanza of it, in which he talks about where these masterful, these wonderful images come from. And he goes basically to a scatological reference, to the gutters, to the bottles, to the refuse, to the sluts, and everything. He said, all come from here. That's basically how a work of art should be conceived of. It's something that is deeply steeped into this thinginess. It's like a painting. What you see is certainly the beauty of the painting, but also you see all these colors and all pigments and all that kind of stuff that you find in the matter itself. The matter or the crux of the matter in the work of art. So, voilà, that's the second part of your question. Okay. I think we should stop it here. Thank you very much for your attention. I think there's a coffee for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rashid, for this insightful and illuminating lecture indeed, and for presiding this panel. Many thanks also to me, Manaa, Cinda, and other colleagues who participated online. Now we have a coffee break. Short one, then we resume to have 5 additional presentations. So we'd like to see you again today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.